A peaceful honeymoon on a secluded beach takes a terrifying turn when a couple stumbles upon a massive great white shark stranded in the surf. Determined to help, they inch closer, unaware of the danger until a crashing wave throws them into chaos. In an instant, the shark's jaws snap shut, drawing blood into the water and leaving them helpless against the creature's powerful instincts. This tragic encounter is just one of the 6 shark attack stories we'll dive into, real events that show just how quickly nature's calm can erupt into terror. It was April 8, 1997, and Nina Hayes and Leo Rinaldi were on their honeymoon in New Zealand, on a secluded beach called Matai Bay. Matai Bay was not a busy place. It was quiet and far from the usual tourist spots. That's why they'd picked it, hoping to have the beach mostly to themselves. Nina and Leo had been married just a week, and they were eager to enjoy every moment together, far from the noise of the city and the rush of everyday life. Leo was adventurous, always looking for something exciting. Nina was more cautious but was happy to go along with him, enjoying his sense of curiosity. They arrived early in the morning, planning to make the most of the whole day. The waves were gentle, rolling softly up onto the sand, and seabirds flew overhead, calling out to each other. They laid out a blanket, unpacked snacks, and set their camera up to capture some memories. They were still laughing and chatting about their wedding when Leo spotted something odd in the distance. At first, they weren't sure what they were looking at. Leo thought it was just some large rocks or maybe a pile of seaweed washed up by the tide. But the shape seemed to move, slowly and heavily, like it was struggling. Curiosity got the better of him, and he walked closer, with Nina following behind. When they were close enough, they realized what it was. A massive great white shark lying half in the water, half on the sand, thrashing against the shore. Nina's heart pounded as she took in the sight of the great white. She'd seen pictures of these sharks before and knew they were powerful creatures that patrolled the waters around New Zealand. They were known to be solitary and mysterious, not something you'd ever expect to find up close like this. But there it was, stranded and struggling, its tail moving slowly in the shallow water, its gills flaring as it fought to breathe. The sight was breathtaking, almost unreal. Leo was fascinated, his eyes wide with excitement. He looked at Nina and suggested they help. At first she thought he was joking, but he was serious. He explained that if they didn't do something, the shark would die there on the beach. The idea of helping such a creature was intimidating, but Leo's enthusiasm was contagious. Eventually she agreed, nervous but willing to trust him. They approached carefully, watching the shark's movements, trying to stay clear of its head and powerful tail. Up close, the shark was even bigger than they'd first thought. Its gray skin was rough under their hands, and it lay there, barely moving, as if exhausted. It must have been caught by the tide and ended up too far on the sand to get back out. The thought of leaving it there felt wrong, and Nina could see in Leo's eyes that he wasn't going to walk away. Together they began pushing, hoping to inch it closer to the water where the waves might lift it. The shark was unbelievably heavy. They pressed their hands against its side, pushing with all their strength, but it was slow work. Nina could feel her muscles straining, her arms burning, but she kept going, focusing on Leo's determination. He encouraged her to keep pushing, saying they were close, that they could save this creature. Inch by inch they managed to move it down the shore. They were so focused on the shark that they didn't notice a larger wave building up in the distance. It wasn't until it crashed over them that they realized the danger. The force of the wave knocked them both off their feet, sending them tumbling in the surf. Nina tried to hold on, but her grip slipped and she found herself struggling to stay upright in the water. She scrambled back, spitting out salt water, and looked around for Leo. Leo had been thrown to the side, closer to the shark's head, and was just getting his footing. But in the chaos, the shark had become more disoriented and panicked. Its jaws opened, and before Nina could react, it lunged toward Leo, its instincts taking over in the confusion. The shark's teeth sank into Leo's leg, and he let out a cry of pain. Nina's heart dropped as she saw the blood pouring into the water, mixing with the surf around them. She rushed to his side, pulling him away from the shark, trying to get him back onto the sand. Leo's face was pale, his eyes wide with shock as he clutched his injured leg. The wound was deep and the blood kept coming, no matter how hard Nina pressed her hands against it. Panic surged through her as she realized how serious it was. She looked around, hoping someone might appear to help, But they were alone. No one was coming, and Leo's breathing was becoming shallow. She tried to reassure him, tried to keep him awake, but his strength was fading quickly. Minutes passed, and Leo's grip on her hand began to loosen. She felt helpless, holding him as his eyes slowly closed, his head resting against her shoulder. She kept whispering to him, telling him to stay with her. But it was too late. Leo's breathing slowed, and finally he fell still in her arms, the life gone from his body. Nina sat there on the beach, the waves lapping at their legs, her hands stained with his blood. She couldn't believe what had happened, couldn't process the fact that Leo was gone. Just moments ago they had been laughing, planning their future together. Now she was alone, holding the body of the man she had just married, all because of a choice they made to help a creature in need. Eventually locals came upon her there, sitting with Leo in her arms, her face blank with shock and grief. They led her away, and the story quickly spread through the town and beyond. People spoke of the tragedy, of the honeymooners who tried to save a shark and lost everything in the process. Some admired their bravery, while others criticized the decision, calling it foolish and reckless. In the weeks that followed, there were many debates. Some argued that humans had no place interfering with nature, and that they should have left the shark alone. Others believed that compassion was worth the risk, and that helping a creature in need was an instinct too powerful to ignore. For Nina, none of it mattered. She was left with a grief that no words could touch, a pain that stayed with her long after the waves had washed away the blood on the sand. Nina spent the following days in a fog of disbelief and sorrow. She replayed that moment over and over in her mind, wondering if there was something she could have done differently if she had convinced Leo to leave the shark alone. She thought about how quickly everything had changed, how their honeymoon had turned into a nightmare in a matter of minutes. It was October 16, 1999, and the air buzzed with energy along Bondi Beach in Sydney, Australia. Hundreds of people had gathered for a charity swim that stretched along one of the more challenging sections of the coast. This year, the event felt especially charged, as participants prepared to swim for a cause dedicated to ocean conservation, a tribute to all the lives connected to the sea. Among the crowd was Jenny Tanner, a devoted swimmer who had been drawn to the ocean since she was young. She had her reasons for participating. Her older brother, Evan, had been a marine biologist, deeply committed to studying ocean life. He'd passed away a year before, and since then, Jenny had felt a pull to continue his work in her way. Completing this race was her tribute to him, her way of honoring his memory and the sea he had loved. Jenny knew the route. The stretch of water they'd be swimming through was infamous for shark sightings, particularly bull sharks. Bull sharks were common in Australian waters and known for their strength and unpredictable nature. Unlike other sharks, they thrived in both salt and fresh water, making them one of the more dangerous species. Jenny had read about them often. They were aggressive, territorial, and powerful swimmers that could reach up to 11 feet in length. Though the organizers had taken safety precautions, there were always risks, especially in waters like these. Jenny didn't feel fear, she felt purpose. She believed in the race and her brother's work, so despite the cautionary announcements, she shrugged off any concerns about the sharks. She was here to finish what she'd started. She stretched, took deep breaths, and looked at the water stretching out before her, thinking of Evan, feeling his presence with her. The announcer called the swimmers to the starting line, and soon the event began. One by one, they waded into the water and started the long, tiring swim. The sea was calm at first, each stroke taking her further into its depths, steady and powerful. Jenny moved with ease, her body trained for this distance. She felt a rush of energy, enjoying the rhythm, the steady push and pull of her muscles against the water. Other swimmers moved beside her, some faster, others keeping to their own pace. She kept a steady line, focusing on her goal and remembering why she was there. But around halfway through, Jenny's mind drifted, and she lost track of the others. She didn't notice that she was pulling slightly away from the main group. It happened gradually. She became so absorbed in her strokes that she missed the moment when she was no longer swimming near anyone else. The water around her seemed vast and empty, stretching out in all directions. She was used to swimming alone, but in this unfamiliar sea, the isolation felt different, heavier. Back on shore, the organizers had their hands full. They were tracking the swimmers, but with so many in the water, it was easy to miss one or two, especially with the waves making visibility difficult. For a while, Jenny's absence went unnoticed. She kept moving, pushing herself further, unaware of the widening gap between her and the others. Then something shifted in the water around her. It was subtle at first, just a change in the currents, a slight resistance. Jenny stopped, lifting her head to get her bearings. She realized she couldn't see the other swimmers. She looked back at the beach, but it was barely visible. Anxiety crept in as she realized just how far she'd gone. She took a breath, trying to steady herself, but a feeling of dread settled over her. A flash of movement caught her eye, a shadow beneath the water, something large and fast. She knew instantly what it was, a bull shark. The outline was unmistakable. It was circling her, each pass bringing it closer, moving with the power and silence that only a shark could. Panic surged through her. She'd read about this and knew that bull sharks were highly territorial, and here she was, alone in its territory. She tried to stay calm, keeping her movements slow, hoping it would lose interest. But the shark didn't move away. Instead, it circled tighter, coming close enough that she could see its body. The way it cut through the water with terrifying ease. Back on the beach, organizers heard the first signs of trouble. A swimmer was signaling distress. Someone had spotted blood in the water. An alert was raised, but they weren't sure where Jenny was, or even that she was the one in danger. The beach staff moved quickly, but resources were limited. There were too many swimmers to track each one closely, and by the time they zeroed in on the area of the disturbance, precious minutes had slipped away. Meanwhile, Jenny's heart pounded as she tried to keep herself steady, but the shark came closer, brushing past her leg. In that split second, she felt its rough skin graze her, and before she could react, it turned sharply and bit down. The pain shot through her, intense and overwhelming, a tearing sensation that took her breath away. Blood clouded the water around her, and she struggled, trying to break free. But the shark held on, its grip unyielding. The water thrashed as Jenny fought, her movements weakening. Just as suddenly, the shark released her, its powerful instincts satisfied as it disappeared back into the depths, leaving her drifting in the water. Jenny's body floated, her strength fading rapidly, blood still spreading through the current. Other swimmers were starting to notice. One man looked back and saw the trail of red in the water. He shouted for help, waving his arms, trying to get the attention of the lifeguards. A rescue boat was dispatched, speeding toward the scene, but the chaos of the water made it hard to reach her quickly. As the boat finally approached, the crew members could see the blood spreading in the water and the look of panic on the other swimmers' faces. They called for backup, but Jenny was already slipping beneath the waves, her strength gone. The rescuers pulled her from the water, but she was unresponsive, her body limp in their arms. They moved quickly, attempting first aid, but deep down they knew it was too late. The news spread quickly along the beach. People looked on in shock, some covering their mouths in disbelief. The event, once full of energy and hope, now carried a heavy silence. Organizers, officials, and spectators alike felt the weight of what had happened. The terrible realization that they had lost a swimmer, one who had come to support a cause in honor of someone she loved. As Jenny's family was informed, grief swept over them, knowing she had died in the water her brother had studied and cared for. The charity swim continued in future years, but the memory of Jenny's loss left a mark on the event and the community, a somber reminder of the power and unpredictability of the ocean. People spoke of her bravery, of the way she had pushed through fear to swim in memory of her brother, though it had cost her everything. On July 10, 2000, just after sunset, Tyler McCabe prepared for a rare night dive off the coast of Gansby, South Africa. Known as the Great White Shark Capital, Gansby attracted divers and researchers from around the world, drawn by its waters full of marine life, including some of the largest great whites ever seen. Tyler, a young but seasoned underwater photographer, had joined a small team for a series of night dives, hoping to capture the ocean's hidden life in complete darkness. He loved the thrill, the feeling of entering a different world with only a flashlight to see what lay ahead. The day had been calm but long. Tyler and the team had spent hours setting up equipment on the boat, adjusting lights, testing cameras, and reviewing their route. He was eager to get underwater. The dive's purpose was to document the habits of nocturnal creatures. Tyler had a fascination with reef sharks, smaller but still agile hunters, and hoped to capture them up close. The team planned to stay together for safety. They knew that night dives carried risks, and the darkness added another layer of danger. Great white sharks were known to hunt in these waters, especially drawn to movement and light, but they hoped to avoid them. Though everyone was aware of the risks, Tyler's team trusted each other and their equipment. Tyler, however, tended to push limits. He was always looking for the perfect shot, the one that would bring an unseen part of the ocean to life. They began their descent into the water, the cold pressing in immediately. Below, the darkness was absolute, like a heavy blanket around them. The only light came from the flashlights they held, each diving a small beam in the vast black water. Tyler kept his eyes peeled, sweeping his light back and forth as he moved. The stillness was intense, each sound amplified. The hiss of air bubbles, the faint movement of fins. Soon he spotted a reef shark, its sleek form gliding just beyond his light's reach. Excitement buzzed through him, and he signaled to the others, indicating he wanted to move closer. His team was focused on another part of the reef, occupied with their cameras. Tyler, caught up in the moment, decided to drift away for a better angle. He swam deeper, his light following the shark as it weaved in and out of the coral. He adjusted his camera, snapping photos as the shark moved. The creature was beautiful, moving with a confidence that Tyler admired. He edged closer, engrossed, hoping to catch it just as it turned. But it moved further ahead. Tyler followed, completely absorbed, unaware that he was drifting farther from the group. At that moment, he didn't notice the shadow shifting behind him. He didn't see the larger presence moving in the darkness. Great white sharks were common in Gansbai, known to patrol the waters looking for seals or fish, anything that stirred up motion. The movement and light from Tyler's flashlight had caught its attention, drawing it closer, curious yet cautious. Tyler adjusted his flashlight, aiming it around to get his bearings, but then his light hit something massive. A huge, ghostly shape emerged from the dark, the unmistakable frame of a great white shark. Tyler froze, the reality of his situation sinking in as he registered its size and the closeness of it. The shark's body was just feet away, its eyes cold, its powerful jaws open slightly as it swam, drawn to the light. He tried to stay calm, his hand tightening around his flashlight, but the sudden burst of light had startled the shark. In a swift, predatory move, it lunged forward, jaws open wide. Tyler's flashlight dropped, plunging him back into near darkness, with only a faint red glow filling the water as he felt the sharp bite. The team, still nearby but unaware of his location, had seen his flashlight disappear. They looked around, trying to spot him, realizing that he was no longer within the group. Then one of the divers noticed a cloud spreading in the water, a sign of blood. An alarm surged through them as they scanned the water, trying to locate him. As they reached the spot where his light had gone out, they saw the terrible truth. Tyler's camera floated downward, the strap drifting with the current, his flashlight a few feet below. They moved quickly, signaling for help and pulling him up to the surface as fast as they could. But they knew there was little they could do. The great white was gone and the water was still. Once on the boat, the team scrambled, trying everything they could to save him. But Tyler was already unresponsive. They had been only minutes too late. Tyler, who had once described the ocean as his second home, had been claimed by the very waters he loved. His teammates sat in silence, their faces pale with shock, their hearts heavy with the realization that Tyler, their friend and teammate, was gone. The news of Tyler's death spread fast. The media covered the story extensively, focusing on the dangers of night diving, especially in places like Gansbai, where great whites hunted. People shared stories of other close encounters, of sharks drawn to the lights, and the risks of being in their domain after dark. Tyler's family and friends were left with a sense of loss that went beyond words, struggling to understand how someone so skilled, so careful, could have met such a fate. The Gulf of Papagayo, Costa Rica, had always held a certain pull for Dr. Sarah Niles. She felt at home on its waters, where each dive was a step closer to understanding the sharks she worked so hard to protect. Sarah had spent nearly 20 years studying tiger sharks here, tagging and tracking them to learn about their patterns and habits. Tiger sharks, with their striped bodies and curious nature, could grow over 12 feet and were powerful predators, known for their strength and unpredictability. Sarah respected them, approaching each dive with caution but also with a deep sense of purpose. It was June 14, 2002, and the team had gathered early, preparing for what they thought would be a routine day of tagging. The water was calm, a good sign for the work ahead. Sarah and her colleagues had been focused on gathering data on young tiger sharks, believing that studying these juveniles could help protect the species in the future. The morning had been spent testing the equipment, reviewing the safety protocols, and talking through the day's plan. Sarah was in her element, moving around the boat, checking in with her team, and finalizing the list of sharks they hoped to find. Around midday, they got a signal that one of their nets had caught a young tiger shark nearby. It was about 6 feet long, smaller than the full-grown adults, but still strong. Sarah and the team approached carefully, using a boat to get close to the net, while Sarah prepared to go in and attached a tracking tag to the shark's fin. Her colleagues watched closely, ready to help as she geared up and dropped into the water, her movements steady and practiced. As she swam closer to the net, the young shark thrashed around, its movements tense and sharp. It was clear that the shark was stressed and caught up in the netting, which only added to the challenge. Sarah had done this many times before and knew how to approach carefully, positioning herself near its dorsal fin where she could reach it without startling the animal. But the shark was more distressed than she expected, jerking from side to side. She signaled to her team, trying to keep them calm while she adjusted her position. One wrong move could provoke the shark further, and she knew she had to be precise. Carefully, she reached forward, beginning to work the net free from its body, all while keeping her eyes on its head and tail. Her teammates held their breaths, knowing the risk, but they trusted her skill. As Sarah worked, the shark suddenly twisted hard, sensing freedom, but it was also in a panic. Its powerful body whipped around, and in an instant, its open jaws closed around Sarah's arm. Her team watched in horror as the shark's teeth sunk in, pulling her closer. Blood clouded the water around them, and Sarah's face went pale as she struggled to pull her arm free. The team sprang into action, some yelling for help, while others tried to move closer to her in the water. One colleague managed to grab her free arm, attempting to pull her back to the boat. The shark, still caught up in the net and thrashing, wouldn't release its hold, dragging Sarah further under the water with every movement. Despite her efforts to keep calm, she was losing strength, the injury taking its toll. She could feel her grip slipping, her vision growing hazy as the pain intensified. The minutes felt like hours. Her team, desperate and frantic, tried everything they could, pulling and cutting at the net to free her. But the shark was strong, its instinct to fight making the situation even worse. As Sarah's strength faded, her colleagues realized that they couldn't reach her in time. One final thrash of the shark's body and Sarah went still, her lifeless form slipping from their grasp as the shark, finally freed, disappeared into the depths. The team managed to pull her back onto the boat, but it was clear she was gone. They sat in silence, the weight of what had happened settling over them, the loss of a brilliant scientist and friend. For Sarah's team, the experience was a harsh reminder of the dangers that came with their work, the risks that even years of expertise couldn't eliminate. When news of her death spread, the scientific community was shaken. Dr. Sarah Niles had been a pioneer, someone who had pushed the boundaries of marine research. Her dedication had inspired many, but now her death left a somber question hanging over her work. How far should scientists go in their pursuit to understand dangerous species? The incident ignited debates on the ethics of close encounters with predatory marine life, a conversation that cast a shadow on the field and Sarah's groundbreaking contributions. On an early morning in August 1998, the waves at Stinson Beach, California rolled in steadily, just as they had every other day. The surfers who frequented this spot knew it well, with its mix of easy breaks and challenging waves. Locals had heard that Brady Klein, the legend of Stinson Beach, was heading out for a final surf before moving to Hawaii. Brady, known along the California coast for his bold moves on the waves, had surfed these waters for over a decade. Today, he wanted one last ride before he said goodbye to the place where his surfing career had started. The morning began calmly, with only a handful of surfers already out on the water, catching small swells and chatting about the day. They knew Brady well, had watched him ride some of the biggest waves around, and learned from his fearless approach. Brady had a reputation not only as a skilled surfer, but as someone who didn't shy away from risks. It was part of why everyone respected him. That summer had seen an unusual rise in shark sightings along the coast. Great white sharks, known to roam these waters, had been spotted more frequently, especially closer to shore. The cool waters off California's northern coast attracted great whites during the late summer months as they hunted seals and sea lions. These predators could reach lengths of over 20 feet, their presence enough to keep most people cautious. But Brady, like many surfers, wasn't fazed. He trusted the ocean, and this day felt no different. Brady paddled out alone, further than the rest of the group, seeking out bigger waves. His friends and a few onlookers from the shore watched as he moved smoothly through the water. The waves rolled in with the kind of power he loved, and he settled in, waiting for the right one. When it came, he paddled hard, feeling the rush of speed as the wave lifted him. For a few moments, it was just him and the board, cutting through the water like he'd done 1,000 times before. As he rode the wave, he spotted something in the distance, a fin slicing through the water. He brushed it off, thinking it was just a dolphin, a common sight here. He was used to seeing them, and they often played alongside the surfers, darting through the water with ease. Brady continued his ride, focused on his last session, not letting anything distract him. But then he felt something slam into his board from below, a hard, sudden jolt that threw him off balance. Before he could react, he felt a sharp, intense pain in his leg, as if something had gripped him tight. The reality of what was happening hit him. A great white shark had mistaken him for prey. The impact of the bite sent shock waves of pain through his body, and he struggled to pull free, but the shark held on, dragging him deeper into the water. On shore, a few surfers and beachgoers noticed the commotion. They could see Brady struggling, the water around him darkening as the shark's grip tightened. Some of his friends tried to paddle out, shouting for help, but the distance and fear held them back. They watched helplessly, frozen by the sight of the massive shark thrashing in the water, still holding on to Brady. As the moments stretched, Brady's strength began to fade. His movements slowed, his body weakened by the blood loss and the intensity of the struggle. The shark released him briefly, circling back while Brady, gasping for air, tried to keep himself above water. But before he could get away, the shark struck again, pulling him down in a swift, brutal motion. The scene on shore had turned somber, the onlookers in silent shock. The water, once calm, was now tinged with red, marking the spot where Brady had gone under. His friends who had cheered him on moments before were now paralyzed with grief and fear. They could do nothing but wait, hoping for a miracle that didn't come. Rescue boats eventually reached the scene, pulling Brady from the water, but it was clear that he was gone. The reality sank in for everyone who had gathered there, watching a man they'd admired taken by the ocean he loved so much. Brady's death sent a wave of shock and sorrow through the surfing community. He had been their guide, their fearless leader, and now he was gone, taken by the very waves that had shaped his life. Brady's final surf became a story that spread quickly, a reminder of the risks surfers faced in waters where sharks roamed. For his friends and family, his death marked the end of an era, a somber closing to a life spent on the edge of adventure and danger. On a sunny morning in September 1995, Liam Roberts set out for a solo dive off the coast of Jupiter, Florida. Known for its warm waters and stunning marine life, this area had become one of his favorite places to explore. Liam had spent countless hours here, diving deep into the blue to get close to the ocean's creatures. The freedom and thrill of diving had always been his escape, and he'd grown confident in these waters. He was aware that Jupiter's coast was known for bull sharks, but that had never stopped him before. He saw it as part of the adventure. Liam was an experienced free diver. At 32, he had already spent more than a decade exploring Florida's coast, and he knew the dangers. Bull sharks, known to patrol these waters, could be unpredictable and aggressive, especially near the shore where they hunt. These sharks were powerful, fast, and able to reach over 10 feet in length. They were known for being fearless, and divers were always warned to stay cautious. But Liam trusted his instincts, believing his skills would keep him safe. That morning he prepared his gear and checked the conditions before taking his boat out. He liked the calmness of being alone on the water, away from noise and distraction. His friends had often warned him about solo diving, especially in shark-prone waters, but he waved off their concerns. Today was no different. He took a deep breath, slid into the water, and began his descent. Once below, the world around him was quiet, the water cool against his skin. Liam moved with ease, keeping his breathing steady as he dove deeper, scanning the area around him. Colorful fish darted past and rays of light filtered down, casting a soft glow. He spotted schools of small fish in the distance and felt the familiar rush that always came with the freedom of diving. This was why he loved it, the sense of being completely connected to the sea. After about 30 minutes of diving, Liam caught sight of a large fish, a grouper hovering just beyond a coral formation. Its movements were slow and graceful, and he decided to go after it. He adjusted his position, drawing closer, thinking about how close he could get without startling it. His focus narrowed, and he pursued the fish, pushing his limits as he moved further from his starting point. His instincts for caution faded, replaced by the thrill of the chase. But as he swam deeper, a shadow moved beneath him, circling slowly. Liam didn't notice it at first, too focused on the fish, unaware that a bull shark had sensed his movement and was now watching him. Sharks were drawn to movement and sound, and the bull shark's curiosity brought it closer, following Liam's every move. Bull sharks often patrolled these shallow waters, and they could strike without warning if they felt a threat or saw an opportunity. As he turned to begin his ascent, Liam finally saw the shadow below. A chill went through him as he realized what it was, a large bull shark, its eyes fixed on him, moving with intent. He knew he had to stay calm to avoid sudden movements, but his heart raced. He increased his pace, hoping to reach the surface before the shark grew more aggressive. Liam's strokes became faster as he moved toward his boat, but the shark didn't lose interest. Instead, it sped up, closing the distance between them. He felt a burst of fear, knowing he couldn't outswim it. His mind raced as he thought of ways to stay safe, but the shark was too close, its instincts fully awakened by his movement. Suddenly, he felt a powerful impact from behind as the shark struck. Its jaws clamped down on his torso, and the pain was immediate and overwhelming. He struggled, kicking hard, trying to break free as the shark held on. Blood clouded the water around him, and he fought to stay conscious, feeling his strength draining fast. His body screamed in pain, and he could feel himself growing weaker with every second. The shark, after a few moments of struggle, released him suddenly, driven by instinct and the taste of blood that triggered it to search for easier prey. Liam, now free, floated for a moment in shock, his mind numb from the pain. He tried to kick and pull himself through the water, desperate to make it to his boat. His vision blurred as he struggled to stay afloat, each movement more difficult than the last. He could see his boat just a few yards away, the surface so close, but his body was giving out. The injury had taken too much from him, and he knew he was fading. As his strength left him, he looked up one last time at the world above, the light filtering through the water. By the time a passing boat spotted the blood in the water, it was too late. Liam's body floated just below the surface, lifeless, the ocean quiet around him once more. His death shook those who knew him, the friends and family who had always worried about his solo dives. They had admired his skill and passion, but now they were left haunted by the knowledge that even experience could not guarantee safety. The incident raised questions about the risks of diving alone in shark-prone waters, a reminder that nature's power could overwhelm even the most seasoned diver. For the local diving community, Liam's fate became a cautionary tale, a story of a man who had loved the ocean but had underestimated its dangers. His final dive became a reminder of the fine line between adventure and risk, a lesson etched in the waters of the Florida coast.